You know, last week after the service, we found in the pew one of those guest registration connection cards, and there was no name on it, but a woman had written that she was here with her 11-year-old son, and nobody said anything to her. That grieved my heart. I'm not shaking my finger at anybody, but it's easy to do, but please, at the end of every lesson, what do I say? Please find someone you don't know and say hello. It's very easy to go love on the people you know, but I would urge you today, find someone that you don't recognize and just go say hello. They may have been members here since the first cornerstone was laid, but if you don't know their name, this is a good chance. Jordan got us this morning when he pointed out that of the three people on the platform, he was the only one wearing a coat. Maybe the next service I can point out that that's true, and indeed, he's also the only one without his shirt tail tucked in. What's the point of wearing a coat if your shirt tail is going to be out behind it? But that'll just be our little secret, maybe. I want to tell you about Andor Foldes. Andor Foldes was one of the most accomplished musicians of the 20th century. The young Hungarian was only 16 years old when he had an opportunity to play his piano before Emil von Sauer, who at that time was perhaps the most famous pianist in the world and the last surviving pupil of Franz Liszt. So you talk about a pedigree. Von Sauer had requested that Foldes play for him, even though he was only 16, and Foldes obliged with some of the most difficult and intricate works of Bach and Beethoven and Schumann. And when he finished, von Sauer walked over to him and kissed him on the forehead. He said, "My son, when I was your age, I became a student of Liszt. He kissed me on the forehead after my first lesson and said, 'Take good care of this kiss. It comes from Beethoven, who gave it to me after hearing me play. I have waited for years to pass on this sacred heritage, but I feel you deserve it.'" Turn to Genesis chapter 27. Genesis chapter 27. By the way, in line with what I opened the lesson with, the Wilhites joined the church and are in our class today, and it's your assignment to find them. Go hug on them. Before I start, I want to tell you something I'm just about to bust over. We have poured so much into this ministry with Southwestern students, and it is showing such fruit. And today at the 11 o'clock service, we're going to have one of the sororities is going to be here with all their new pledges, and their sororities we're going to reserve a couple of rows, and they are kind of naming us as their church, because on campus they call us the church. And we are the only church many of them know. One of my very favorite little rays of sunshine, Beulah, it's her sorority, and it is the Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is the oldest African-American sorority in America. And those young ladies are going to be here, and I'm so excited I can't stand it. Amen. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." I just can't stop. I can't go any further, rather. I have to stop because I want to put these things in perspective, and if you just read the Scripture without some idea of the biblical backgrounds, you just miss so much of the flavor that's going on here. We indeed have an old man that says he's old. His eyes were so weak, he couldn't see. He was about blind. So you're thinking he's on his deathbed. And indeed, the best I can tell from extrapolating numbers from Joseph and Isaac's death and such as that, I can tell you that I believe that at this point Isaac is indeed old. He's 137. Here's the kicker. He lives to be 180. So even though he may think he's on his deathbed, like I do some mornings, he says, "My son, come here. I want to talk to you." Well, his son Remember, he was 60 when his sons were born. So you tend to see this young guy, coming up to the bed. The young guy is, one of the twins, is 77. So that's putting it in perspective. He calls his son, his older son. Remember, they're twins. Esau was the older. "Here I am," Esau answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country and hunt some wild game for me. Prepare for me the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." We got to stop and camp out here for just a minute, because I got to set the table for you, figuratively. Remember that we found out in previous chapters that Isaac was in fact a lover of wild game. And Jacob was the farmer of the twins, and Esau was the outdoorsman. He would bring home wild game, and remember, he could make some tasty stew that his father really loved. And the Bible tells us something that's kind of a warning. It just kind of ran right by us, and that's that Isaac favored Esau, and Rebekah favored Jacob, even though they were twins. They were very different. And now, as soon as you hear that, that's got to set off alarm bells, because the Bible doesn't have anything in there that's frivolous. And so that told us what was about to happen. One favored one favored the other. You can see a train wreck coming. And sure enough, it's about to happen here, because Isaac calls his oldest son first, even though it's by seconds, and also his favorite son, and said, "Go out and rustle me up some grub and make it some of that venison that I just love. And when you come back, I'm going to give you my blessing." Now, it really gets complicated here, because there are a couple of concepts we need to discuss that aren't familiar to the 21st century American mind. The first is that, if you'll remember chapters previous, that when Esau had come in from a hunt and hadn't found anything, he was famished, and his brother Jacob says, "Well, I have some of this red stew that you love so much." And, Esau says, "Gimme, gimme, gimme. I'm ready to have it." And he says, "Well, not quite so fast. It's going to cost you something. Your birthright." Whoa. Most of us don't have a concept of the birthright, but it was deeply ingrained into their society. And here's what it was. If a man had 4 children, for example, upon his death, the older son would be the patriarch of the family, would be the ruling person in the family. But when they divided up an inheritance, they would divide it up into 4 parts, but the person with the birthright, the oldest son, would get 2 parts. So he got more, twice as much as anyone else got. So there was something very significant about the birthright, but apparently Esau was very hungry for that red stew, because he was very cavalier about trading his birthright, or his place as eldest son, for a bowl of stew. And we talked a great deal about that. But so now we come to a time where Isaac calls his oldest son, Esau, before him and says, "I want to give you a blessing." The blessing was something different. The blessing usually went hand in hand with the birthright, but the blessing was a kind of a formal time, and it could have happened at any time during the son's life, where he called the eldest son in and says, "I confer upon you a blessing." And some of it was actually prophecy. Jacob himself gave a prophecy to his sons when he gave them a blessing. And you may give each son a blessing if you want, but only one blessing could go to the eldest son. Not exactly the same as the material blessing of the birthright, but this was a spiritual blessing. Do you see that there are 2 that kind of parallel each other, but they're not exactly the same? So he called Esau in and said, "I'm going to give you a blessing when you come back." Troubles are brewing, because Rebekah was listening. What's the problem? Who's Rebekah's favorite twin? Jacob. Who's about to get the blessing? Esau. All right, so she listened as he spoke to Esau. And when Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.'" Well, both of them, their radar must have popped up, because, this is a problem, because Jacob already knows he has the birthright. So technically speaking, he's the firstborn son now when it comes to possessions, but Dad's about to give a blessing. And let me tell you, in many ways, that counted for more than even the birthright did. So Rebekah is remembering something. And this is where we're going to kind of see if you've been paying attention. Remember when Rebekah found out that she was pregnant with twins, God gave her a prophecy. And it was kind of an ominous foretelling when he said, you know what? You're carrying twins. They're not going to get along. Not going to get along. And the older will serve the younger. So she knew, as a prophecy from God, that somehow something was going to happen so that Esau was actually going to carry a subordinate role to his younger, albeit barely, to his younger brother Jacob. So it could be that she was just a selfish stage mother who wanted her favorite son to do well, or let's cut her some slack and say maybe she remembered what God had told her about one serving the other, and she thought she'd do what many of us do frequently. We'll help him out. You know, I don't know how you're going to do this, God, but here, let me step in and do it for you. So look what she says. She says, I heard your father say to your brother, bring me some tasty game, and now we're going to get a blessing. And look in verse 8, she says, now my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat so that he may give you his blessing before he dies. So she's hatching up a plot. She says, look, the old man's blind. He doesn't, you know, he's got one foot on the solid ground and 1 foot in the grave. He's about ready to give his blessing. We can't let this get away from us. Go get me a couple of goats. I'll cook them up to taste like venison. I'll cook them just like he likes them. You take them in and present them to him and get the blessing because, after all, he's blind. Well, there's some flaws with that. And Jacob immediately says, wait a minute. And I love this one. My brother Esau is a hairy man. I don't know exactly what that means, except there was a discernible difference. I guess I would be called a hairy man. You know, the little plastic bracelets that you see people wearing all around, you know, like for youth events and such as that. They give them to me all the time, and I say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. You put it on my arm, and it's immediately going to be wrapped up in hair and knots, and it's going to be painful whenever it moves, so I can't take those. So I can understand the hairy man thing, but he's hairy. And when I go in to present this game to him, he's going to know something's up. He said, I'm a man with smooth skin. What if he touches me? I would appear to be tricking him, and I would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. He says, look, I've already got the birthright. I'm still in line here as second, so I'm going to get a blessing. It's not going to be the blessing necessarily that I prefer, but hey, if I go in there, I could blow the whole thing. Not to mention 2 other small things, and this may sound kind of funny to me, but bear with me. Any of you who have 2 or more children, don't they smell different? Let's discount the fact that about teenage boys, and you know who smell like something rotten. I'm sorry, guys, but no, let's just your kids smell different. I'll tell you, I can hug my kids, and I know which one it is. How about their voices? 2 completely distinct voices. So you're thinking, boy, did they think this out? Well, follow along with me. So they're going to worry about the hairy thing first. His mother kind of allays his fears by saying, look, if there's a curse, don't worry about it. I'll take it. In other words, I'll take the blowback. If there's any curse, let it fall on me. Just do what I say. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm reading this, the first thing I think is, Mama's boy. Come on. And then it really gets weird when I realize he's 77. Mama's boy. Yes, once a mama's boy, always a mama, I guess. He's 77. Come on, Ma. Let him make his own arrangements here. So she says, look, just do what I say. So he went and got them and brought them, the goats, to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food, just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. Why? There's that smell thing. Okay? Even if he touched the robes or touched the clothes, likely he would be able to think, okay, same clothes, same smell of my son Esau. Here's the best one, though. She covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. Esau must have been one ugly dude. That's all I can tell you. If goat skins, and anybody ever been around goats or hair sheep, let me tell you what, that's some pretty stiff, bristly hair. And just to think what it must have been to tie on goat skins or around the back of his neck and on his hands, but she's gotten him all dressed up in Esau's robes and hanging this goat hair on him. And then she handed her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread he had made. The die is cast. It's time to try to pull the old switcheroo. So he carries the food in, and you can just see him in fear and trembling going in before Isaac and saying, "My father." Dad indicated immediately, you could tell he smelled something going on, because he says, "Yes, my son, who is it?" Because remember, he had sent Esau on a mission, and yet someone with a little bit different voice has entered the room and said, "My father." So he's expecting Esau, but this sounds like someone else. So he said, "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, and here starts the trouble, "I am Esau, your firstborn." The die's cast. It's done now. The deception has begun. He can't back out. He's posing as his brother. And this, to my knowledge, is in recorded history the first identity theft. Okay? I don't know if he had a social security number or what, but this is the first identity theft. So he says, "Okay, I'm Esau." He says, I've done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." He didn't waste any time on small talk, did he? He said, "Here's the food. How about the blessing?" Just walked right in and tried to get the deception going as quickly as he could. Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" It probably didn't take long to run out and get a couple of goats and barbecue him up, but he expected Esau to be out hunting venison, and so to go out, hunt the venison, get back, prepare it. He said, "Wow, you sure did that quickly." The reply is telling. The reply is telling. He knew what Isaac wanted to hear, so he said, "The Lord gave me success." But that's not all he said. He said, "The Lord," did he say the Lord my God? No. Did he say the Lord our God? What he said was telling. He said, "The Lord your God," which indicated to me that at the age of 77, he still didn't have nearly the type of relationship with the Lord that Isaac did, even though he was supposedly raised in that tradition. The Lord your God. And you will see a metamorphosis, by the way, in Jacob in just the next few chapters, because in the future he will refer to God as the Lord my God. So he said, "Look, the Lord my God gave me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so that I could touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." He smelled a rat. He smelled a rat. And believe me, if Esau had come in, he would have known immediately that it was Esau, but something wasn't right. And he knew something wasn't right. The voice had to be a giveaway. So he said, "Look, let me make sure. Come on over here. Let's check it out and see if you really are who you say you are." Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "Wow, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." Couldn't do anything with the voice, could he? But what did he do with the hands? Goat hair. Hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he blessed him. And he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He knew something still wasn't right. Listen, Jacob's in too deep to get out now. So he says, yes, I am. Then he said, "Bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing." He thought, well, okay, I'll taste the game and make sure it's just like I like it. Jacob brought it to him and he ate. He brought some wine and drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." What does that indicate to you? He's still not sold. He's still not sold. All right? He feels right. You know, everything looks right. The game is right. He says that he's Esau, but there is something wrong. So he went to him and kissed him, and when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness and abundance of grain and new wine." So now, when he proclaims that, okay, this must be the right one, he smells like the open air and not like a barnyard. Smells like my son, the one I want to bless, and he launches into the blessing, and listen to this. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers. This is kind of interesting because now he thinks he's talking to Esau and telling him to be Lord over his brother Jacob. May the sons of your mother bow down to you. In other words, any sons that come along in the future, they're going to be subject to you also. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Very much like the type of blessing that we've seen God give to people in the past few chapters. Just the type of thing that says, my blessing's on you, so if anybody tries to curse you, may they be cursed. And anyone who blesses you, they have my blessing also. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. You can see the problems start to mount. Here's one thing you need to know. A blessing at that time was irrevocable. Once spoken, it was done. And even the person who gave the blessing, having discovered that it was done under false pretense, was not able to call it back. There was a very strict code of honor in this. And so once it's spoken, it's done. So now, this person, whom he thought was Esau, but was actually Jacob, has been blessed. He's received his father's blessings. And what was one of the primary blessings? You're going to rule over your brothers. You are going to be my firstborn son, even though he meant to give it to Esau. Well, now Esau comes in, and you've got to see this picture. He's panning. He's been out. He's finally knocked down some game. He's prepared it just like he knows his father wants. He comes in fully anticipating that he's going to receive his father's blessing. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Almost the identical words of his brother brother Jacob, who was posing as Esau. So he says, look, here's your game. Sit up and eat it, because after all, I'm expecting to receive your blessing. Oh, the tragedy of the next statement. His father Isaac said, "Who are you? Who are you?" He thinks he's just given his blessing, and now here comes someone who sounds a whole lot like Esau, coming in with some food that tastes just like Esau's food, and says, "Here I am. Give me your blessing." "Who are you?" "I'm your son," he answered, "your firstborn Esau." What's going through Isaac's mind right now? His head's got to be spinning. He can't see well enough to confirm what's already happened to him. He thinks he's already given his blessing to his firstborn Esau, but now I got to tell you, I think it's at this point he says, "Oh man, I've been had." Because here's one that actually, smells like, looks like, tastes like, sounds like Esau, and he knows that he's given his blessing to the wrong person. Because Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came and blessed him." And here's where the door slams closed. And indeed, he will be blessed. There's no turning back. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, me too, my father." True, he could have received a blessing. History is replete with fathers blessing multiple sons, but he didn't get the blessing. He didn't get the blessing. So he says, "Isn't there some way, please, that you can do this too?" He knows he's already traded away his birthright, and now he's lost the blessing. Esau said, "Isn't he rightfully named Jacob?" Remember, Jacob, literally translated, meant heel grabber or supplanter or deceiver. So he said, "Look at there, we named him right. He's deceived me these 2 times. He took my birthright He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. And then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? He's looking for a loophole anywhere he can. Isn't there any way you can bless me? Isaac answered Esau, I've made him lord over you, and made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son? Esau asked his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. Then Esau wept aloud. What Esau pronounced was more a prophecy than a blessing, but he said, your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. In other words, what he's saying is in the future, you're still going to be subject to your brother. You're going to live as an outcast, and all this is going to come true, by the way. But he says, there will come a time when you throw his yoke off your neck, where you will not be his servant. Esau had a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. You think? And he said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. I'll kill my brother Jacob. Now here's a problem, because it said he said to himself. So he thought it. But you look in verse 42, when Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, we don't know how she got it. If he told her, if she overheard him, if she told someone else. But we do know that even though he thought it, she found out that he intended to kill Jacob. She sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, get out of town. Your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Here we go again. Mama helped him get into this mess. Now Mama's going to try to get him out of it. Do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Remember, that's 375 miles north. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day? What's she talking about there? Well, if Esau finally did what he threatened to do and kill his brother Jacob, then likely he would have had to have forfeited his own life also. So she says, I can't bear to lose both of my sons. Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. What? What? Listen, this is one scheming woman. She's got to get the boy out of town, and she's got to have a reason to go out of town. And here's one that will resonate with Isaac. Because when it came time for him to find a wife, his father sent him north to his homeland to get a relative, not one of the pagan women in that area. So she says, okay, he'll understand that. She says, I'm tired of these pagan women around here. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from among the Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. So she's setting the table to get him out of town, to get him up to Haran, which is where her father Laban lived and where she came from. So she wants her favorite son to get away from the danger that her other son poses. Next week, we're going to catch up in chapter 28 because I want to kind of cover one of the things that just jumped out at me when I studied this. Look at verse 34. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry, and said to his father, bless me too, my father. I spend a great deal of time counseling with people, and it breaks my heart to see the damage that parents can do to their children. This breaks my heart. I really think that deep inside every one of us is a longing for the blessing and approval of our parents. Some of us receive it. I did, and I've shared with you how incredible, how wonderful my parents are. I received it. Some don't. It's hard for me to understand sometimes when I'm counseling with people because I haven't experienced the rejection or the negligence of a parent. But to hear when that happens, when one or both parents are either absent or because a parent withholds a blessing. We've discovered in our college ministry that many of them don't have both parents. And they love interaction with us because it's like a family relationship. And I'm just amazed at how many times these young men, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old men, will gravitate to the men in the church. It's astounding to see. It's like, here's something I never got at home. Unconditional love and a blessing. A blessing. Last week, Charlie Skaggs got a gift. The week before, he had sat down with a young lady and was asking her hometown, and he went and got her some lemonade. He pours drinks, and she turned to him. Charlie's got that big white beard. She says, "You remind me of my grandpa." And Charlie said, "Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?" She said, "Well, he died 2 weeks ago." And she broke down in tears, and so he put his arm around her and prayed with her. Last week, she showed up to the lunch with 2 roses and a note for Charlie that says, "Thank you for being my grandpa when my grandpa couldn't be." See, people are still looking for a blessing. Still. Now, listen, Jacob was a rascal. No two ways about it. He was a deceiver and a con man. And yet God chose to bless him. It would seem that he didn't deserve God's blessing, and yet God did bless him and bless him abundantly. And as we're going to find out in a couple of chapters, God gives him the same promise he gave his grandfather Abraham. That from you will come a great people. What do we learn from that? I mean, this is a great story, but it's more than just a story. Like me, Jacob was a deeply flawed person. And yet, like me, he was blessed. God blessed him. Here's what we learn, that God wants to bless us too. And here's one of the greatest blessings that you'll ever receive. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believed in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your blessing, even when we don't deserve it. And Father, I thank you for a love that we can't even imagine, a love that is lavished upon us when we don't understand why we get it. But I want to thank you, Father, for these who come, who study your word, who immerse themselves in it to understand how deep is your love. And Father, I just want to pray that when we go from this place, we're able to share that love with others. Now, as we do so, please give us strength and courage, for we ask it in the precious name of your Son. Amen.